Stanley was prepared to throw the bucket away in disgust when suddenly Stanley realized, this isn't my bucket.
Zdravím vás, gamery, vážení diváci, vítajte v 7. epizóde Stanleyho príbehu a rozprávača a vlastne aj Kýblika, pretože toto bude asi záverečná epizóda Stanley Parable. To som aj rád, lebo to nie je veľmi dlhá hra, ale je to celkom dosť koncov, ktoré vraj Kýblik ovplyvňuje. Pozrel som tak nespoileroidne, aby som si to zjednodušil, mám ich aj vypísané u seba a asi si to prejdeme tak, viete, tak zo strihania, aby ste videli iba tie závery, čo sa zmenilo. Neviem, ktoré stoja za to, neviem, ktoré nestoja, asi to nejako prestriam. Vraj je tam pár fakt dobrých a no proste chcem si prejsť všetko, čo zostáva v tejto hre, ak sa nám to podarí. Každopádne našiel som ozaj ešte ďalší koniec a je veľmi zaujímavý, proste robíte toto.
Oh well, look who's got cold feet. Sorry to break it to you, Stanley, but that lift isn't coming back. You'd best either get comfortable right here on this platform or test your luck by jumping to the floor below.
Ďakujem.
You know what? Looking at it now, it's not that far to the
Iste.
bottom floor. But in his eagerness to prove that he is in control of the story and no one gets to tell him what to do, Stanley leapt from the platform and plunged to his death. Good job, Stanley. Everyone thinks you are very powerful.
Dobre, to je len koniec, ktorý ešte tam bol v hre a ten random koniec mi asi vôbec nepríde, že? OK ľudia, takže striháme, ideme na to. OK, tak pozrieme si, aký rozdiel je, keď to zapneme.
But at the last second, the bucket jumped in and pressed the button to turn on the controls. Stanley gasped in horror. Had this been the bucket's plan all along? To take over the machine and claim the power for itself? How could the bucket have betrayed him like this? Stanley was prepared to throw the bucket away in disgust when suddenly an image appeared upon the enormous screen. Birds. Silly, silly birds. The control buttons became active again. Stanley flipped through one video of silly birds after another, and then it dawned on him. This wasn't a mind control facility at all. It was a facility for monitoring and surveilling silly birds all over the world. The mind controls were only a facade to disguise its true intentions. Had the bucket known this all along? Stanley marveled at the metal genius in his hands, the one who had pointed him towards this incredible discovery. Stanley and the bucket never found freedom because they spent the rest of their lives here in this place, flipping through live streams of the silliest birds imaginable. Of all the possible paths his life could have taken, this one was surely the best. And Stanley was happy.
OK, tak toto som nečakal. Poďme na ďalší koniec. OK, ľudia. Tu na tejto križovatke sme mali mať dva konce. Idem radšej sem, to je najdlhšie, čo sa sem chodí. Takže, prvý má byť na bottom, na spodku. To sme už raz zažili, ako to bude teda rozdielne.
But just as Stanley was about to proceed further into the mind control facility, he tripped and fell over the railing and into the dark void below.
OK.
Thankfully, he fell directly onto the bucket, which safely cushioned his fall. Now, what to do next, Stanley wondered. Stanley and the bucket could find no way out of this enormous pit, and so eventually they decided that the best thing to do would be to simply get comfortable down here. So they set up a little couch and relaxed. It really wasn't so bad down here, a bit cold perhaps. After some time had gone by, they installed a few shelves as well, and a sort of kitchenette that was useful for when the bucket was craving paninis.
OK.
But it wasn't until the rugs and the standing lamps came in that it really started to feel like a home. In fact, after some time, Stanley realized that it had been ages since he had even thought of the mind control facility at all. He'd never gotten to fully explore what was up there, never been able to unearth the many mysteries of the mind control facility. This lack of closure began to eat at him. Soon he was dwelling on his regrets, and the state of their home slowly decayed as Stanley became withdrawn and neglected the cleaning.
Okay.
It unsettled the bucket deeply. Stanley wasn't usually like this. The bucket tried to reach out to him again and again, but to no avail. All Stanley could think about, all he could talk about, was going back, doing it over again, staying on the path. It was a mistake to leave the path. It was a mistake. It was a mistake. I need to do what the narrator says. I need to see the true ending. This made no sense at all to the bucket, which was simply trying to live its life down here as comfortably as possible. Yet Stanley was unconsolable. This isn't an ending. This is just a hole in the ground.
A hlavne odkiaľ máte televíziu.
True, it wasn't an ending. But it's where we happen to be. And maybe, possibly, if we accept the reality of things, maybe this will become an ending eventually. It's what the bucket was counting on.
Oh.
The two of them waited for a very long time.
Okay.
Stanley and the
Tak
bucket
sme tu zase, ale zdrháme.
Mind control. Although this passageway had the word escape written on it, the truth was that at the end of this hall, Stanley and the bucket would both meet a violent death.
Tak poďme na to.
The door behind them was not shut. Stanley and the bucket still had every opportunity to turn around and get back on track.
Ale dobre.
At this point, Stanley and the bucket were knowingly walking forward into a very painful death for each of them.
Ak neklameš. Asi neklamal. Alebo? Tak neklamal. Sempre vid
neklamal. As the machine
neklamal.
whirred into motion and Stanley and the bucket inched closer to their demise, Stanley reflected on how meaningless the bucket's warmth and comfort had turned out to be. To be sure, it puts the mind and the soul at ease to embrace the bucket. But what use is a sense of ease when you're about to be crushed to death? This is what Stanley thought to himself, and he sort of kicked himself for wasting so much time carrying a bucket everywhere.
Pôjdeme ozaj do múzea, alebo nepôjdeme? Oh.
Farewell, Stanley, cried the narrator, as Stanley and the bucket were led helplessly into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, the bucket's life came to an end, as it was crushed violently to death.
Okay. Okay. Je to nejako
iné? It was a shame, the death of such a magnificent bucket. It's true that all buckets are radiant in their own way, but this one stood above the rest. It was a glorious bucket to behold.
O nie. Oh. Aha, takže to bude celé iba o Kýbliku. Super.
Can you see how arrogant it was for Stanley to take a bucket like this and to claim it for his own? Can you see the hubris that blinded him? Can you see that the bucket is far more noble than Stanley will ever be in his short life?
Je to totálne rozdielne. O nie. O nie.
No man can own a bucket, and certainly not a bucket as dazzling to behold as this one. It is man who should kneel before the bucket.
Okay. To je akože ono.
But there is something we can do. Something we can do together, you and I, that will right this terrible wrong.
Okay, čo?
Let Stanley die. Let him be crushed by the machine. Don't reset the game. Don't give him another opportunity to run off with another beautiful bucket. We can save the world's buckets from their treatment as tools and implements if only we let Stanley die together.
Ne. Ďalší koniec, ľudia. OK, ľudia, ďalší koniec má byť zase s výťahom. Tak uvidíme.
Wait, Stanley said to the bucket. Can we go back up? When I was pressing those keypad buttons, there was something very intriguing about the number 3. I want to go back so I can try pressing the number 3 again. The bucket said nothing.
OK, číslo 3. Takže číslo 3 mám stlačiť, naozaj. A hej, tie mreže tu ozaj boli. OK, tak číslo 3. Tak to vyskúšame.
Here we are, said Stanley. Now I'm going to try out that number 3 button. He took the bucket over to the keypad and began absolutely slamming on the number 3 over and... Well, he said, the number 3 is such a special button. I'm having the time of my life. Stanley looked expectantly at the bucket, but the bucket remained silent. This was a shock to Stanley, who had always felt such a connection with the bucket. How was this not as exciting to the bucket as it was to him?
OK, naspäť do
Once Stanley
výťahu.
had had enough of the number 3, he got back in the elevator.
Takže naspäť, dobre. Tak, poďme.
Perhaps the bucket had missed something. Perhaps it had not seen how much joy Stanley got from slamming the number 3
To si...
repeatedly.
Ne. My sa máme vrátiť akože naspäť hore. Ja aby ste vedeli, ja
A
iba...
hint of regret nagged in the back of Stanley's mind. Should he demonstrate the number 3 for the bucket again? No, said Stanley to the bucket. You can't go on yet. Not till you understand how much the number 3 means to me.
Ja aby som upozornil, neviem, čo sa v týchto koncoch deje, len viem, ktoré tu sú, čo som si urobil zoznam. A máme ich ešte dosť pred nami. Aj, len... OK. Takže číslo 3.
Here we go, said Stanley. This time I'll really show you. He ran to the number 3 and began to wail on it like a musician on a beloved instrument, weaving a concerto of truth and passion. He wielded the number 3 like a fine artist would wield a paintbrush. He told stories through the number 3, stories of his dreams and hopes and fears, and the whole time he looked to his bucket for a reaction of some kind. Anything to let him know that the bucket appreciated what he was doing.
OK.
The bucket conveyed absolutely nothing at all.
Zase do
Only
výťahu.
silence. Crushed by a wave of dejection, Stanley returned to the elevator. Stanley and the bucket were so close. They'd always been there for one another.
Oh.
Why suddenly could the bucket not connect with this passion of Stanley's? The question caused Stanley to ruminate the whole way down the elevator. He knew that there must be a way to get through to the bucket, to communicate fully with his dear friend. Surely there was a solution, mustn't there be?
Oh. Oh.
Said Stanley. I know what to do. I know how to fully express this feeling in my heart. He decided right then and there that he would hold a press conference where he would speak to the public on all matters relating to pressing the number 3 over and over. He would elaborate fully on what the number 3 meant to him and why he felt so alive when pressing it. Then the bucket would be able to see his joy through the eyes of others. It would get to see the world react to this discovery of Stanley's. And it would be through the public eye that the bucket would finally understand Stanley's work. For months he advertised and marketed his press conference, building excitement around it, developing and rehearsing it, until it couldn't be refined a single measure further. When the big day arrived, Stanley was as prepared as he'd ever been for anything in his life. This was it. One last chance to win the bucket over. One opportunity to share a true connection with a loved one. There was no one here. Nobody had come to the press conference to hear Stanley speak, to listen to him talk about what it really means to press the number 3 on a keypad over and over. He was unloved, uninteresting, he was a failure, and in that moment Stanley knew that the bucket would never again take him seriously. There would be no connection, no deeper understanding. The bucket merely sat there in his arms, indifferent. And so it began that slowly, over many years, the two of them grew more and more distant. They spoke less and less, neither wishing to state the obvious, that any sense of real respect between them had eroded since that day at the press conference. There would be no more games, no more long conversations about passion and pursuit, only a silence that consumed the space between friends. And Stanley, having for once in his life discovered the warmth and comfort of true companionship, was cast back into the unremarkable normalcy of loneliness.
Tak, ďalší koniec, ľudia. Výborne. Dobre, takže... Ani tu nie je rozprávač. Tak asi to len môžem urýchliť, že? No tak. Dobre. Toto tu vlastne hneď skončilo, tak aká bude zmena? Seriózna animačka. Ale no tak, neobkytkávaj. To bolo... ono? Ľudia, my tu nemáme kýblik. Čo mám teraz robiť? Akože vyskúšať... preštartovať, alebo čo? Ľudia, trošku sa nám zmenilo prostredie. A je tu aj bucket. Náhradný bucket. Ale no tak, ja som ho nestratil. Aha. Takže sa to zmenilo len kvôli tomu. OK, takže iba sa to trošku zmenilo kvôli tomu, aby nám dali náhradný kýblik. Ja som myslel, že sa to zmenilo na ten jeden koniec, čo sme nevideli, čo je náhodný. Dobre, každopádne nemusím to ani strihať, pretože ďalší koniec, ktorý má byť trošku rozdielný, je tento. Tu sme zošaleli, ak si pamätáte.
He considered the possibility of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then, something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy.
Počkať, nepletiem si?
He looked down at the bucket in his arms.
Dobre.
Am I crazy? He asked the bucket.
Okay.
The bucket returned his gaze, but said nothing at all. That's strange, Stanley thought. Usually the bucket is a source of guidance and wisdom for me in difficult times such as these. He held the bucket close, yet felt none of its familiar reassurance and comfort. And that's when Stanley realized, this isn't my bucket. It's just a normal, everyday bucket. Someone else's bucket. How did I end up with someone else's bucket? This is all terribly wrong. Surely no good would come from this. Who knows what sorts of bizarre hallucinations Stanley might experience without the psychologically grounding presence of his bucket. And indeed, now he noticed that the rooms were repeating, which was, of course, very odd. And now he felt himself floating off the ground. Oh, gracious, he exclaimed. Without my bucket, I've gone truly mad. Where is it? I must find it. Far off in the distance now, he heard it, calling to him. Stanley! Stanley, it's me! The bucket! Could it truly be? He rushed forward from room to room, passing by one bucket after the next. None of them were his. None of them were his special bucket. Come to me, Stanley! Find me! He had to find the bucket. He had to return to his old friend. It was the only way to truly restore his sanity. And then suddenly, he froze dead in his tracks. He knew where the voice of the bucket had been coming from. The real bucket was inside of him all along. It was incredibly painful. Stanley doubled over in agony and blacked out. OK, je to trošku rýchlejšie.
Bude aj nejaká animáčka.
This is a story of a woman named Mariella.
Jaj.
Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, picked up her bucket of comfort and security, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town, talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. Right away, she knew what the problem was. This man had no bucket. Of course he'd gone mad, ranting and raving about a narrator describing all of his actions and how everything is predetermined and free will is an illusion and it's all just a video game. It could all have been prevented if only he'd taken his bucket with him. Perhaps he didn't even realize he'd forgotten his bucket at home in the first place. How cruel the world can be, Mariella thought, and she hugged her own bucket even tighter. But of course, she had no time for this. There were a myriad of confusing problems she would soon have to confront at work, for which her bucket would provide absolute guidance and total clarity on everything. Heck yes, she thought to herself, my life kicks ass. And she backpacked all the way to work.
Tak super. Ďalší koniec asi ide. Takže. Má to mať aj vlastný confusioning, takže som veľmi zvedavý, a hlavne či nebude taký dlhý ako predtým. Lebo ocenil by som, ak by bol kratší, len...
Oh, good Stanley, I'm glad you found your way here. I knew you'd find this place eventually.
Oh.
You see, your friends and I are concerned for you, Stanley. We've come together here because we care about you very much. It's this bucket you're carrying around everywhere. The bucket isn't even from the original Stanley parable. It's just sequel content. We're the ones that matter, Stanley. Classic characters from the first game, like the adventure line and the broom closet. Because that's what fans want from a sequel. They want more of their favorite jokes, not this bucket that they've never seen before. Yes, I know I'm the one who gave you the bucket, but you're spending too much time with it. Don't you want another story involving the adventure line? We could make the adventure line go somewhere new. Yes, yes, that's what the fans want. Let's do it. Whee! Look at that wacky line. Who knows where it'll go off to next? Oh, and it played some silly music as well.
Kýblikom, ideme.
Now this is what the Stanley parable is all about. Don't you remember all those great jokes from the original dialogue?
Also, Stanley is addicted to drugs and hookers.
Yes, it's as classic now as it was back then. Let's do it for the fans, Stanley. Let's give them more content exactly like this. But if we want to do that, you're going to have to give something up. Don't you get it, Stanley? We need to get rid of the bucket. That's why I'm very proud to introduce a brand new character. This is the Bucket Destroyer. I think it'll make a wonderful new addition to the rich lore of the Stanley parable. True, it also was not in the original game, but it's such a well-fleshed-out character with so much personality that to me, it already feels as though it's been part of the cast all along. Don't you agree? Can you guess what the Bucket Destroyer does? Surely you don't need me to spell it out for you. Go ahead now, Stanley. Say goodbye to the bucket, and then pop it into the machine when you're ready. Now listen to me. It's crucial that you give it the bucket. I don't know what the Bucket Destroyer will do if it can't destroy your bucket. Destroying buckets is all it knows. That is its singular personality trait. Sure, I can hear you saying, how does a character with only one personality trait deserve to join the pantheon of beloved Stanley Parable characters? Well, you see, if you were to really explore the Bucket Destroyer, you would see that its desire to crush buckets is so densely loaded with complexity and nuance that it's really like 10 personality traits. What other object in this game can you even say that about? The broom closet? Certainly not. I wonder what sort of Bucket Destroyer merchandise the fans will be clamoring for after this. Okay, the bucket destroyer is getting very upset now. You'll have to hurry and feed it. We can't get back to the classic Stanley parable characters like the Adventure Line or the bucket destroyer until you crush that damn bucket. Quickly now, the fans are waiting. Do it, the fans. Stanley, give the fans what they want. Hurry and...
Wow.
The bucket destroyer, my prized creation. You had so much potential. We were going to do such marvelous things with you, tell such spellbinding stories about you. All of it squandered now. Goodbye, new friend. For the moment in time that you were here, you were magnificent.
Čože? No počkaj, a čo sa stane, keď mu dám ten kýblik? To sa teda budeme musieť asi vrátiť, že? Nečakal som, že tu bude rozhodnutie. Počkaj, ja to...
Destroying buckets is all it knows. That is its singular personality trait.
Okay.
Sure, I can hear you saying, how does a character with only one personality trait deserve to join the pantheon of beloved Stanley parable characters? Well, you see, if you were to really explore the bucket destroyer, you would see that its desire to crush buckets is so densely loaded with complexity and nuance that it's really like 10 personality traits. What other object in this game can you even say that about? The broom closet? Certainly not. I wonder what sort of bucket destroyer merchandise the fans will be clamoring for after this. Okay, the bucket destroyer is getting very upset now. You'll have to hurry and feed it. We can't get back to the classic Stanley parable characters like the Adventure Line or the bucket destroyer until you crush that damn bucket. Quickly now, the fans are waiting. Do it, the fans. Stanley, give the fans what they want. Hurry and...
Takže máme tu pár tých koncov, ktoré sú také, no. Môžeme viackrát... Dobre, toto sú také tie rýchlejšie.
Stanley feared that any path he walked might lead to the separation of himself and the bucket, his dearest friend. So he threw himself to his death, that they might die in one another's arms. How deeply touching.
Okay. Okay, teraz ten druhý skok.
Oh well, look who's got cold feet from here. It looks like the only way forward is down, since the lift won't be coming back, but that's okay. You've got a bucket. Did you know that buckets are routinely used as cushioning devices? It's true. You can fall on a bucket from literally any height and survive.
Naozaj? Okay.
Whoops. Looks like I was wrong. How clumsy of me.
Aj, dobre. Okej, ty. Takže ďalší koniec má byť asi šachta. A predpokladám, že táto šachta. Tak poďme. Kde nájdeme tie tajomstvá. Je tu nejaký rozdiel?
Okay, this is day number 295. Take number... I don't even know. I've lost track. Nothing feels real anymore. The longer I study this bucket, the less sense anything makes. The sheer euphoria I feel every time I pick it up. No matter how many times I've done it, it's always the same feeling. And the emptiness in my chest when I set it down. It doesn't make sense. There's no explanation for it. I still haven't figured out why I see the world so differently when this bucket is in my arms. Why everything feels so...
Ooh.
What do I do with this treasure? I can monetize it.
Oh, nie. Yeah.
It's unthinkable the amounts of money people will pay for even just an hour with the bucket. This is my golden ticket. But I have to be careful, because as soon as this gets out, there's going to be a target on my back. Even now, I don't know who might be trying to get... What's that? Who's there? Caporata.
Polovka Túlu, alebo čo? Čo sa stalo? Okej. Zase nám to zrýchlili. Dobre ľudia, premýšľam, že či to tu už neukončím. Kýblikové dobrodružstva, budem na budúce pokračovať. Dostáva nám už len pár, ale môže byť dlhšie. Viete čo, ukončíme to v ďalšej epizóde. Ďakujem za sledovanie, prajem pri deň, príjemné hranie. Majte sa.